So I just want to make sure we're recording this for everyone. I'd like to introduce our speaker today. I'm Latasha Pittman with Mondo. I'm the marketing director for Mondo. Our speaker today is Jason Boudrie. He's the founder and CEO of Synergy Sports. He has over 25 years of experience in the fitness, wellness, and sports industries. Having held certifications through NASM, NSCA, and USAW, among others, he has built numerous health and wellness companies, dozens of fitness and sports facilities, and a nationally recognized corporate wellness consulting company. He has worked with thousands of clients and dozens of businesses locally, regionally, and nationally. For more information on Synergy Sports, please visit his website at www.synergysportsglobal.com. Assisting me today will be Chad Johnson. He will moderate our Q&A session for today. Chad Johnson is our Northwest Regional Sales Manager. He has a master's in kinesiology with an emphasis on exercise science, certified strength and conditioning coach formerly at Georgia Southern University. He is a published author in the Journal of American Health. Topics include exercise behavior predictor variables in emerging adults. So thank you, Chad. Just to give you a few housekeeping rules today. As you sign in, you will notice that we do have a poll. We would ask that you all basically complete the poll question, and we will review the results of the poll after the presentation. At the end of the presentation, we will open up for a Q&A session. So you can submit your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, or you can also submit questions in the chat box. We would prefer that you submit those questions in the Q&A, and we will do our best to address the questions that you submit at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, we will turn it over to Jason, and we'll get started.
Great. Thanks so much, Latasha. Chad, thanks for being part of this. Welcome, everybody. Again, my name is Jason Boudrie. I own Synergy Sports. We're a national sports development company. And over the years, I've worked with thousands of athletes on sports performance, speed and agility, strength and conditioning, and performance nutrition. So wanted to take a little bit of time today just to share some information on the topic of nutrition, and specifically sports nutrition, and hopefully give you guys some good takeaways that you can take back to your schools and to your sport to make you a better athlete. So first and foremost, I want to thank Mondo, thank Chad and Latasha for the opportunity, to Coach O for putting on this webinar series. As Latasha mentioned, if you have questions, use the Q&A function, and we'll try to get to as many of those as we can through the session. And so we've got a couple goals for today. You know, when we look at nutrition, there's a saying of you can't out-train a bad diet. And that's very true, especially when it comes to collegiate sports. So when we talk about performance nutrition and nutrition in general, we have to look at several things. First and foremost, eating for general health and wellness. And so what do we mean by that? So just as a person on this planet, how do we eat healthy for the benefit of our body, not only now, but for years in the future? And so we have to have a foundation of a good, healthy eating plan for when we're not competing. Then specifically, what are the nutrition needs of an athlete? Whether you're in season or out of season, whether you're eating for a competition or for training, for practice, or if you have multiple events in a day, what do those nutritional needs look like? Nutrition is a big, complex, and confusing topic. And so there's as many meal plans and nutrition suggestions as there are athletes. And so the goal for today is try to make sense of some of the confusion out there. And more specifically, look at things that you have to be aware of as an athlete. We'll look at meal plans and how you should be eating, and what are some recommendations and some guidelines for eating for maximum performance. And then finally, we want to take a look at the role of supplements. In today's world of collegiate sports, everyone is looking for a way to improve their performance, improve their level of play, and supplements play a big role. And there's certainly some supplements that are helpful. There's some supplements that you need to be aware of that raise the red flag. And globally, we kind of have to understand the role of the NCAA and what their restrictions and their requirements are. So without further ado, we'll kind of get started on this. And so to kind of set the table for what we want to talk about today is, first and foremost, general health and wellness. And with that, in terms of general nutrition and healthy eating, look at some of the things that affect the population as a whole. Most Americans don't know how much to eat, when to eat, what to eat, or how to eat. There was a study done that in 2020, there will be about 83%, over 8 in 10 people, or 8 in 10 men, and 72% of women will be overweight or obese. That is just a startling number. And when you think about that in terms of your role as an athlete, and more importantly, just as a human being, all of that starts with obviously how we eat and how we move. And so from a nutritional standpoint, making better choices in what we eat will determine our health for the long term, not just in your 4 or 5 years of playing sports. 34 million Americans, which is about 1 in 10, have diabetes. And about 88 million Americans, which is about 1 in 3, have prediabetes, or they're on the verge of becoming diabetic. And on average, somebody dies of a heart attack every 37 seconds in the United States. Again, these are startling statistics that show how poor our knowledge as a society is of nutrition is, and how easy convenience and processed foods are for people to consume. There are about 2,300 deaths from heart attack every day. And so to make small changes in how we eat and what we eat, we can make a big impact on the overall health of ourselves as a society. And as we all grow older, we won't have to worry about some of the same things. Specifically as college athletes, most collegiate athletes don't meet their own meet the recommended daily requirements for macronutrients, for calories, for protein, carbohydrates, and fat. And so a study was done of about 85 swimmers in 6 Michigan area universities. 95% of them that answered the survey did not meet their daily requirements for nutrition. And so that really kind of emphasizes the fact that even though college athletes are supposed to be performing at their best, a lot of them don't know the basics of nutrition. And some of that is because college athletes either don't have access to or choose not to eat healthy foods. And so that's one of the first things that we're going to look at is, how do you do a better job at eating healthy foods? Coupling that lack of knowledge or lack of interest, the food award that the NCAA awards doesn't adequately cover the cost of eating enough quality calories for a lot of the student athletes competing in sports in the US. And again, with the NCAA, some of their laws dictate what can be served and how things can be offered to student athletes as far as snacks and meal training tables and that sort of thing. Schools are able to provide carb drinks and electrolyte drinks and energy bars and things like that. But where sometimes there's a disconnect is in their ability to offer high quality food and whole food over the course of an entire season or an entire year. So now that we've kind of set the table, we want to get into goal number 1, which is eating for health and wellness. And so a quote from Kobe Bryant: "A diet that's bad for your overall health can't be good for your performance." So again, reiterating the fact that we have to eat good, generally speaking, before we can even look at eating for performance. And so then we ask the question, why is sports nutrition important? Beyond the general health benefits, we want to be able to increase muscle, we want to manage body fat, improve our performance, supply energy for practice, competition, and recovery. So those things are pretty well known intuitively of why athletes are athletes and why athletes should be eating a more healthy diet. where the disconnect is going from what we know to be true and why we know we need to eat healthy to actually eating healthy. And so where do we start, right? So we start by understanding the basics. And so understanding the basics for health and wellness and how to eat for health and wellness is the key. And so we're going to look at some of those basic metrics of eating for health and wellness. And then choosing whole foods. We live in a society today where convenience is key, and fast foods and snacks are kind of the mainstay of our nutrition. And so going back to eating whole foods most of the time and supplementing as necessary will set us up for success. Third, be consistent. Eat consistently throughout the day, be consistent with your diet, and you'll reap the benefits of it. Plan and know your numbers kind of round out our top 5 of where to start. So the more you can plan, then the better you can execute. It's the same with practice or training. You know, the more you run plays, the more you practice your track or field event, the more you swim laps in a pool, the more you plan, the better you're going to set yourself up for success. And then finally, know your numbers is kind of a basic thing to know, but when you know your numbers, you not only know where you are, but you can then know where you're going. And so if you want to gain weight, if you want to lose weight, if you want to gain muscle or lose muscle, if you know your numbers of how many calories you're eating, how much protein you're eating, you're better set for making those changes as efficiently as possible. And so how do we eat for health and wellness? That's the first and foremost question that we're going to ask. And so like I mentioned, eating whole foods is the first thing that we want to do. And so when you choose whole foods over fast foods or convenient foods, you get all of the benefits of all of the vitamins and minerals that are in it. So whole foods good, fast foods not so good. As you're starting to choose those whole foods, there's an old saying that if you shop around the outside of the grocery store, you're really going to get everything that you're going to need. The inside of the grocery store, the aisles on the inside are filled with mostly processed foods and snacks and things like that. And so not that there's not a place for that, but eating it in moderation will get you a lot closer to your goal a lot faster. And so when we say whole foods, you know, we're talking about lean protein, we're talking about chicken, fish, turkey, things like fruits and vegetables, things like eggs, things like milk. All of those are whole foods. Doritos is not a whole food. Cheetos are not a whole food. McDonald's is not a whole food. And so when you can eat a variety of fruits and vegetables and lean proteins throughout the day, you're going to feel full longer. You're going to have more long-term energy. Your skin, your hair is going to be better. Your brain is going to function better. And then you're going to be able to function as an athlete better. And so by default, if you eat a variety of fruits and vegetables and whole foods throughout the day, you're automatically limiting your processed foods and the added sugar that comes along with it. And so when you can limit your fast foods and fried foods and packaged stuff, you're going to do wonders not only for your athletic performance, but your body in general. And that being said, as you eat whole foods throughout the day, you want to be consistent. So, you know, feeding your body every 3 to 4 hours is a great way to keep your blood sugar in check. It's going to keep your metabolism from dropping. It's going to help you gain muscle, lose body fat, and have sustained energy throughout the day. And so I wanted to point out a couple of things from a general health and wellness standpoint. I took a look at a McDonald's milkshake. And I don't know whether you guys like McDonald's, don't like McDonald's, or prefer somewhere else, but this is a whole lot of ingredients for milkshake. And so this was a good visual example. Everything in red, every ingredient here in red has a known health side effect to it. And I wanted to point out over here on the right side of the screen, some of the worst food ingredients in food. So if you take nothing else away from this presentation, then starting to look for these ingredients in foods, you're going to do yourself a world of good. Things like high fructose corn syrup is found in almost every food category, has absolutely zero nutritional value, causes weight gain, causes an increase in bad cholesterol. Sodium nitrite, sodium nitrate, okay, this is found in a lot of packaged lunch meats and things like that, is a known cancer-causing chemical. Partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, and then some food dyes, right? Food dyes, over the years, there's been a lot of research on the link to learning disorders and cancer. And you find a lot of that stuff in brightly colored things. So brightly colored cereal, chips, cookies, all of those things have some sort of yellow food dye, blue food dye, red food dye. It's been linked to ADHD in kids and endocrine problems in adults. So here's a great link at the bottom. You guys will be able to get this presentation afterwards, but some of the things that you can look for in food, you can find on this website and start to be a little bit more conscious in the food that you eat on a daily basis. And so now that we've kind of looked at the general health and wellness side of eating, we want to start to take a look at what are the nutritional needs of an athlete. And so there are a handful of categories that are kind of the mainstays of basic nutrition, especially when it comes to athletes. Calories, obviously, is one of them. And knowing your calories and knowing what a calorie is kind of the foundational piece of athletic nutrition or sports nutrition. And so a calorie is just a basic measure of energy. And so everything that you eat or drink, with the exception of water, has calories in it. And so ideally, obviously, the goal is to eat the right amount of calories from the right sources to fuel your performance when you're practicing, when you're competing. And the general recommendation for healthy adults is 2,000 calories a day. Now, athletes generally have a higher calorie requirement than non-athletes, although depending on the sport and the time of season, that may sometimes change. Protein is the second big category, and it is the building block of muscle. And with a protein-rich diet, you gain muscle. Without adequate protein, it's difficult to gain muscle. It's hard to lose weight. It can cause certain health concerns. It keeps you full longer. So by incorporating protein at every meal, you can keep yourself full, and it keeps you in an anabolic state, so you don't have muscle wasting and losing muscle at the expense of fat, especially during intense training periods. Carbohydrates is the third category, and carbohydrates in the media especially gets a bad rap. Everybody's on a low carb diet or wondering if too many carbs makes you fat. Carbohydrates are the main energy source for your body. Without carbohydrates, your brain does not work very well. Without carbohydrates, your lungs, your kidneys, your heart does not work very well. So do not be fooled into thinking a low carb diet creates maximal or better performance, especially with the media given stories about, utilizing more fat and that sort of thing. Carbohydrates are a staple of an athlete's diet. Fat is the fourth category of our global look at nutritional needs of an athlete. Fat is the most concentrated energy source in the body. Some of your basic numbers, some of you may know this, protein and carbohydrates gives you 4 calories for every gram of that component. So for every gram of protein that's in a piece of chicken or in an egg or what have you, you get 4 calories for that. Carbohydrates are the same way. Fat has 9 calories for every gram of carbohydrate, or for every gram of fat, you get 9 calories. So it has more than twice the amount of energy in each gram than do protein or carbohydrates. And fat should make up about 25 or 30% of your total calories in your diet. To give a better example, for let's say an average 150-pound athlete with 6% body fat carries about 1,500 or 2,000 calories in the form of carbohydrates, but they have more than 45,000 calories in the form of body fat. And so even for efficient endurance and ultra endurance athletes, carbohydrates are still important, but stored fat will help you reach your goal and the finish line in a much more efficient way. And then the fifth category we want to talk about is water. So water is sometimes overlooked in terms of the broader nutritional needs of athletes, but 60% of your total body weight is water. And we're going to take a look at this in more detail in a second, but your goal is to consume around 100 ounces of water a day. That's a nice round number. It's easy to remember. And so if that's not something that you're doing right now, certainly make it something that you start to work towards over the next coming weeks and months, is to get 100 ounces of water in a day. You'll feel better. You'll have better performance. Your body will appreciate it, certainly. And so again, nutritional knowledge, especially by athletes, is sometimes lacking. You're not necessarily, as an athlete, supposed to know everything that you're supposed to know about sports nutrition. And so ideally, the school that you go to or resources you have at home, you have access to trainers and sports nutritionists and sports dietitians or a registered dietitian that can help you navigate some of the challenges with sports nutrition, specifically as it relates to your sport. And so generally speaking, in-season athletes can require as many as 2 to 4 times more calories than a typical student. Especially looking at endurance athletes, swimmers, long distance runners, that sort of thing, can require upwards of 10,000 calories or more during intense training periods or when they're in season, compared to that daily recommended amount of around 2,000 calories for a general student. Athletes require marginally more protein than the average person, depending on their sport and their season. Certainly don't restrict your carbohydrates while you're in season. And be sure you're taking in enough water. You'll start to notice a difference in performance once you lose about 2% of your body weight. That's also the time when you start getting thirsty. So there's a direct correlation there that says if you only drink water when you're thirsty, your performance has already started to suffer. And so it's more advantageous for you as an athlete to drink water consistently throughout the day, regardless of whether you're thirsty or not, instead of waiting until you're actually feeling thirsty. And so we want to start to take a look at some of the basics of those categories in a little bit more detail. So looking at protein, we want to take a look at what's called the 3 T's: total protein, the timing of your protein, and the type of protein that you eat. So protein serves as a trigger for the metabolic functions for stimulating muscle and protein synthesis. And so what that means is without protein, it's very difficult to build muscle. Most athletes do get enough protein, which is the T for total, but sometimes the quality is lacking. And so whatever resources you have available, whether we're talking about when you're at school, eating at the dining hall, or if you're at home, especially these days, try to make the best use of the best type of protein you can, using some of the guidelines and benchmarks that we went over earlier. Whole food protein, chicken, fish, turkey, lean beef, and there's also vegan options and vegetarian options. As athletes, more and more athletes are turning to a more plant-based diet, there are plenty of ways to get enough protein with nuts and seeds, pea protein, supplements, that sort of thing. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's important to space out your protein over the course of the day and eat those high quality lean proteins. things that I've already mentioned: dairy, fish, poultry, beef, and then some supplements. And to kind of give you an idea of what your ideal range is for protein, it's about 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. And so sometimes that's a little bit complicated of a math equation, but whatever your weight is, divide it by 2.2 and then multiply it by 1.2 or 2.0 or somewhere in between. It'll give you a range. So for a 150-pound athlete, that daily requirement is between 82 and 136 grams of protein per day. And to put that in context, a chicken breast about the size of the palm of your hand, not including your fingers, gives you about 25 grams of protein. And so, which is about a quarter of your daily requirement. A single egg, hard boiled or scrambled, gives you about 5 grams of protein per egg. And so to space that out over the course of the day, we want you to try to eat about 4 times a day at least, sometimes as much as 6, between 3 meals and snacks. Eating about 20 grams, 15 grams of protein at each meal, again, depending on your gender, depending on your age, depending on your sport, depending on your weight. So that will keep your engine running, so to speak, throughout the day. So moving on to carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, again, should be a staple of your diet. And there are some general recommendations intended to optimize the availability of carbohydrates over the course of the day and over the course of a training session or a season, based on where you are in your training cycle. Whether you're a skill-based activity or a sport where there's not a lot of explosive movement or endurance requirement, moving all the way up to an extreme commitment of training 4 to 5 hours a day at moderate to high intensity. Again, we're using that same calculation on numbers of grams of carbohydrate, just like we did with protein, in that, if you're a 150-pound endurance athlete, should be consuming around 410 to 680 grams of carbohydrates. And we're in the endurance row here. 409 to 680 grams of carbohydrates per day, which is about 1,600 to 2,700 calories just coming from carbohydrates in a day. Conversely, if you're a 250-pound explosive sport athlete that's in season, you should be consuming about between 570 and 800 grams of carbohydrate, which is between 2,200 and 3,200 calories just of carbohydrates each and every day. And so we'll look at a little bit closer at a training table later and how you should set your meals up. But carbohydrates should make up around 50% of your calories and come from whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. And then the last category is hydration. And so typically and traditionally, going back to that example of waiting until you're thirsty until you drink, most athletes, over 53% are dehydrated, 13% are very dehydrated. So 2/3 of Division I athletes are either dehydrated or very dehydrated as they come to practice, which is not a good situation to be in. And so what I mentioned before, there's a drop in performance as soon as there's a decline in body weight of 2 to 3% from sweat loss. Your core temperature goes up, your perceived exertion increases, and you open yourself up to muscle cramps and headaches. Again, that same decline in 2 to 3% is about when you start feeling thirsty. So hydrate throughout the day, have 6 to 8 ounces of water for every 15 to 20 minutes of activity, and replenish each pound of water that you lost during activity with 20 to 24 ounces of water or an electrolyte drink immediately afterwards. And before we leave the subject of nutrition for athletes, we want to take a second to take a look at specifically the nutrition for the female athletes. What's called the female triad is a condition that where female athletes restrict their calories in an effort to lose weight and or body fat to improve their performance. With the unique makeup of female athletes, that leads to a number of conditions and complications that have to be noted. And if you're a female athlete and you find yourself in this situation, first of all, know that there's resources out there. There are coaches, there are trainers, there are registered dietitians that you can work with to make modifications to your meal plan and to your eating regimen so that you can still accomplish your goals and not be affected by some of the problems that come with the female triad nutrition conditions. So some of the complications of female athletes restricting calories in order to lose weight or body fat to improve their performance is low energy, menstrual dysfunction, and impaired bone health. And so there are short-term and long-term consequences to that. And so the short-term is, again, dehydration. If you're restricting your calories, you're not going to get enough water. You're not going to have enough glycogen, which is a simpler form of a carbohydrate. So when you don't have enough glycogen, when you don't have enough water, your performance starts to suffer. You're not getting enough nutrients in your, from food because you're cutting your calories. You have low blood sugar, so you end up getting a headache, which affects your performance. You get tired faster, and then constipation and abdominal pain. And those are just the short-term effects. More long-term issues that affect females when they're cutting calories for this reason is your immune system gets suppressed. You have a 4 times greater incidence of stress fracture. There's issues with infertility, with decreased sexual desire, loss of hair, brittle nails, premature osteoporosis, and even amenorrhea, which is a loss of a period for a female athlete. None of those things are good. And again, there are alternative ways to accomplish your nutrition and sports goals. If any of those conditions are, something that any of you female athletes that are on this presentation are experiencing, again, reach out to a registered dietitian, reach out to your coach, reach out to your sports nutritionist at your school for help in putting together a meal plan and nutrition schedule that you can still reach your goals without killing yourself for it. And so now that we've looked at some of the general health and wellness components of nutrition and specific athletic requirements for nutrition, then the question becomes when should we eat? Now we know what we should eat, but when should we eat? The first thing I want to share with you guys, and it goes back to when you guys were all kids, when I was a kid, breakfast really is the most important meal of the day. For all of the reasons that we all learned growing up, if you ate dinner at 6 or 7 o'clock the night before, you've gone 12 or 14 hours or more without eating. And so in an effort to be consistent and have ongoing nutrition feeding your muscles for the best performance, you don't want to skip breakfast and then, eat a bigger lunch and, have gone 18 hours or so without eating. Meet your daily protein goal. Try to eat every 3 hours or so based on whatever your nutrition requirements are. Again, looking at your gender, your weight, your sport, what season you're in. That post-carbohydrate protein meal immediately after exercise or competition or training can be as simple as chocolate milk and a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Try to do that within the first hour and a half or 2 hours after you train. It replaces your carbohydrates. It gives you a nice amount of protein. It gives you some healthy fats. And it sets your body up to rebuild itself after a hard workout. And then the fourth point here, don't backload your calories. So what does that mean? Backloading your calories is essentially trying to be more restrictive in the morning. Maybe you eat a small breakfast. You're one of those people that say, well, I don't like breakfast. I'm not hungry at breakfast. And you only eat a banana. And then lunch comes and you don't really care for lunch, and maybe you just have a sandwich. But then, from 4 o'clock on, you're eating, 2 dinners and a couple of snacks. That doesn't help your athletic performance. It puts your body into a mode of not knowing when or where or how their next meal is coming. And you end up gaining more body fat, and your body becomes, it goes into this fight or flight sort of mode that tries to hold on to as much body fat as possible, because it's a very inconsistent eating schedule. So the more consistent you can be, the easier it's going to be to gain weight, lose weight, gain muscle, and improve your performance. And so there's a great article that I linked to here that you guys can take a look at. And so now you say, okay, I get nutrient timing, I get spacing out my meals, but what if I'm an athlete and there's multiple meets, or my competition extends throughout the day? I have to perform. I'm a swimmer and I've got, 3 different events or 4 different events, or I'm a track athlete, or I'm a soccer player and we've got, 2 games in 2 days, or, 2 games in the same day. What does that look like? And how should I eat for that? And so we came up with a couple little guidelines. And so if you have an hour or less, right? If you're a wrestler, if you're a swimmer, stick with carbohydrates that are liquid. Your body breaks them down easier. You don't have things sitting in your stomach when it's time to compete again. So things like sports drinks, or if you need to eat a food, then things like oranges and watermelons, peaches, pears, fruit, things that are simple, things that don't take a long time to break down. If you have a little bit longer time in between an event or a heat, then you can eat a little bit more solid food. So you could have a bagel, or cereal, or oatmeal, or an English muffin. Personally, I don't suggest eating things with dairy between meets or events, because sometimes that dairy can sit in your stomach a little bit, and you don't want to compete with milk in your stomach. You can think of it like leaving a glass of milk in a unair conditioned car in the summer for 4 or 5 hours and then going out to drink it. Probably won't taste very good. Drink plenty of fluids, water, sports drink, electrolyte drink, and try to avoid things that contain caffeine or carbonation. It tends to kind of do a number on your system. And then if you have a little bit longer time between your events, 4 or more hours, maybe you have a morning and an evening, then you can eat a more substantial meal. Stay away from a lot of fat. It tends to weigh your system down. So things like a turkey sandwich on whole wheat bread, water, sports drink, Greek yogurt, those sorts of things are good. So goal number 3, sample plans and recommendations. So what does a meal plan look like? How should I eat? You've given me these great examples. You've given me suggestions, but nuts and bolts, what do I eat and when? And so our key takeaways here are, first and foremost, to plan your day and plan your week as best you can. Again, whether you're at home right now or you're still at school, you can make a plan for what your day and your week looks like. Shop accordingly, have your parents shop for you, tell mom what you need, and you're going to set yourself up a lot better for success that way. Prepare your foods. Cut up vegetables, cook chicken ahead of time if you're home. Those sorts of things makes it a whole lot easier. Every once in a while, you can log what you eat. And then, like I said, use some of those resources that you have, online tools and school resources. And as long as you're at home, try to eat well. Again, there's a document here that you guys will have access to. And I've spelled it out a little bit more on the next slide, but this gives you some great takeaways of what to eat and when, based on whether you're on a hard training day or a light training day, whether you're in season or off season, and then some suggestions of things that you can eat from each category. And so this is what a sample meal plan could look like, right? This one assumes that you're pre-season or in season. It's a hard training day. This gives you a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner. Again, things like whole grains, things like fruit, things like lean protein, turkey, chicken, pasta, broccoli, that sort of thing. And then you would supplement this meal plan with a couple of snacks, a snack between breakfast and lunch, one between lunch and dinner. And those can be in the form of protein shakes or bars or just a smaller meal. And then in the off season, when you have a lighter training day, things like, again, toast, turkey, right? It looks a lot the same. You're just not eating the same volume of things. And a sample dinner could be salmon, a baked potato, broccoli. So you're still eating the same high quality foods, you're just not eating as much of it. And so this is what a plate could look like. And again, you guys will have access to this. So hopefully this is something that you can take with you and implement it when you get back to school or when you get home. And so it breaks up your plate, whether you're on an easy training or weight management sort of phase, or moderate training or hard training, and they call it race day, but this could be an event or a competition, where on your easy training day, half of your plate is raw vegetables or cooked vegetables or soup or fruit. And then you've got a quarter of your plate is lean protein. And then the other quarter of your plate is a carbohydrate. And you can see as you move from easy to hard, you're putting more and more carbohydrates into your diet so that you have fuel for your body to be able to maximally perform. And so this is a great resource that you guys can use going forward. And then the last topic we want to talk about today is supplements. And so supplements can be very confusing. Supplements are hard to understand. They're hard to navigate. There's a ton of information and misinformation on the internet. And so it's hard to know what's right and what's wrong, what you can get caught for, what you won't get caught for. And so really be very, very careful on the supplements you choose and how you choose them and what you choose them for and when you use them, because the last thing you want is, and everybody's read and heard of plenty of stories of college and pro athletes that get dinged for using a banned substance and they didn't even know that they did. It was something in one of their protein shakes, or it was in one of their other supplements, and they didn't know it was on the banned list and the label didn't list it. And so what were they supposed to do? So there's no grace on that. And so the onus is really on you for compliance. So here's a question. What supplements are approved for use by the NCAA? Right? Of all the supplements out there, which one or ones have been approved by the NCAA? None. There are absolutely zero supplements that are approved for use by the NCAA. They list plenty of banned substances, but there are zero approved substances. So again, the responsibility is on the athlete and the coach and the dietitian to make the smart choices so that none of the ingredients in any of the supplements that you choose to use fall within the banned substances list. They list 9 classes, and here they are: stimulants, which is very broad, anabolics, alcohol and beta blockers, diuretics, narcotics, cannabinoids, hormones, metabolic modulators, and beta-2 agonists are on it. So knowing that, it's also important to know that CBD oil can show a positive on a screening. And so it will result in a positive test, or it can result in a positive test because it falls underneath a cannabinoid. And so that, again, that's one of those things that if that's something that you choose to do, understand the risks that come with it. Things like Ritalin, ADD medicine, ADHD medicine can also result in positive tests. So if that's a medication that you're on, certainly let your team physician or coach know, or your registered dietitian, so that it can be properly documented in your file. So if it ever does come up, it's already noted that that's something that you use, and it's not something that you just chose to use from a performance standpoint. And so this came straight out of the NCAA rule book. I'm not going to go through all of this, but you can see how in depth it gets with their banned substances. Even things like caffeine are a banned substance. So if you were to get drug tested and the amount of caffeine that came back was above their threshold, you would get, there would be consequences depending on what the rules were for your sport for a positive test. So then what do we look for in terms of supplements? NCAA bylaw number 12 and NCAA Division 2 and 3 bylaw 14 show that there are not very good regulations on nutrition supplements or dietary supplements, even vitamins and minerals, and could cause a positive drug test. There are plenty of examples of student athletes losing their eligibility. And as I mentioned before, many nutritional supplements are contaminated with banned substances that aren't listed on the label. And so any product that you contain is taken at your own risk. And so again, this is where having the support of a registered dietitian or sports nutritionist will help you. And so when you're looking for elite athletic performance, what resources can you go to? There's a certifying body called NSF, Certified for Sport program. And so this is kind of the gold standard of safe, clean supplements that you have a lot better chance of not testing positive on a drug screen or on a banned substance list. And so NSF certified sport products range from creatine to glutamine, protein powder, multivitamins, and they have their own website, and it certifies that what's on the label is in the bottle, and the only thing that's on the label is in the bottle. It doesn't contain contaminants or any prohibited substances that are recognized by any of the major sports organizations, and the NCAA supports the NSF Certified Sport program. The manufacturers that have products that are certified through the NSF program have to meet certain guidelines and are under scrutiny and regulation from sports industry groups and consumer groups. And so I listed the certified products link to the NSF Sport website. You can type in a product that you want to use, whether it's protein powder or anything else, and it'll come up with vendors and products that have earned their certification. And so the last thing we want to look at are what are the top supplements for athletes? So by far, for the past 25 years, the top supplement for athletes is creatine. Creatine monohydrate is a supplement taken usually with juice, sometimes with water. It's a powder. It helps power sport athletes more so than endurance athletes. It helps with faster recovery and reduces the risk of injury. It increases your muscular strength and performance. There is limited and mixed results on the benefits of creatine for endurance athletes because it's more of a quick twitch muscle fiber activated supplement. Protein powder probably comes in a close number 2 to creatine. Most athletes these days take some form of creatine and some form of whey protein. With more and more athletes either choosing to be plant-based or that maybe they have a lactose intolerance or a sensitivity, plant-based protein powders are becoming more and more popular. And with those, look for whole source, organic sources of protein, whether it's whey or plant. But whey protein or plant protein, and there's a bunch of variations on that, increases your overall protein intake, which leads to increased muscle protein synthesis, strength gains. It helps you keep the muscle you have if you're on a cutting diet or a weight loss diet. And it goes into your body a lot faster than other sources of protein. Number 3, caffeine. And I qualify this relating it back to caffeine being on the banned substances list. in looking at bullet point number 4 here, caffeine definitely has its impact and its effectiveness when taken the right way. The recommended amount is a low to moderate dose, which is 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, which varies obviously from individual to individual. For reference, that's a 150-pound athlete. That would be about 200 milligrams of caffeine. Comparing that to Starbucks, a grande Starbucks black coffee only has 330 milligrams of caffeine in it. So you can see where, you drink a cup of coffee or a performance drink with caffeine in it that has around 200 milligrams of caffeine. That's not going to register a positive test and is going to give you a positive or beneficial, amount of caffeine to, increase your cognitive ability and, maximal endurance, and especially with high intensity exercise. Note on that bullet point number 4, high doses and some of the serious side effects that they can have. I mean, a high dose is over 9 milligrams. So that's, 600, 700 milligrams or more of caffeine, which honestly is kind of ridiculous to take that much caffeine before a workout or before an event. Your heart will be pounding, you'll be sweating, you'll be feeling like you're bouncing off the ceiling. So stick with the low dose, do just enough to get what you need and not get into that area of testing positive. And then the fourth supplement that we want to touch on real quick is beta-alanine. You can take a look at this study, and it's been shown to improve exercise performance and reduce the time to fatigue. A lot of times this is combined with a pH buffer that will delay the time to muscle fatigue and muscle soreness. And so as a result, then you also have a reduction in neuromuscular fatigue. So mentally you get tired later because physically you're getting tired later. Essentially then you can perform longer and harder without getting tired. So these are kind of the top 4 supplements that we look for or that athletes tend to use. And some of the things about each one of them. Again, remember that you should really only take supplements after you consult with a doctor, with a nutritionist, with someone at your school, or a team physician, and look for that NSF certification. It really is the gold standard for the certifying process for supplements, and you can feel a lot safer about taking a supplement that way. And so as we wrap up, in summary, kind of some of the key takeaways. Nutrition is a very confusing part of your overall performance. You've got training, you've got mental, you've got nutrition, you've got everything else going on in your life. And nutrition can be confusing. And there's not a right plan for everyone. So just because, your buddy is doing it, a certain workout plan or a certain meal plan, or another girl on the softball team is doing this plan or that plan, it doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you. There's definitely worth taking a look at meeting with a dietitian or talking with a nutritionist to get put on the right path for you. Know your numbers. Again, if you get set up on a meal plan and you know how many calories you need, you know how many grams of protein, how many grams of carbohydrates you need, how much fat you should be eating. It's very easy then to manipulate those levers to be able to gain weight, reduce weight, gain muscle, lose muscle, and then you're not just kind of fumbling around in the dark. Number 4, plan. So as best you can, make a plan for your day, make a plan for your week, base it around your class schedule, base it around your training schedule, your practice schedule, your game schedule. And once you have a plan in place, it's a whole lot easier to follow your plan than it is just to go grab something to eat, from the pantry if you're at home, or, down to the convenience store on campus if that's the best thing that you've got. Number 5, use the resources you have. So again, going back to talk to your dietitian, talk to your sports nutritionist if you have one on campus. If not, find one in your community. to get you on the right path for success. And then finally, use supplements safely. Use supplements under the supervision of your sport dietitian, of your nutritionist, your registered dietitian, your physician if you've got no one else to go to. Don't rely on what you find online. Don't rely on Amazon reviews. Don't rely on what your roommate uses. Do your research. Talk to folks that know so that you can use them safely, so you can maximize your performance while minimizing your risk of injury and your risk of positive results on screenings. And so with that, hopefully you've gained a little bit of knowledge. You've gotten some good nuggets of information to take with you, and you're well on your way to building a meal plan to set you up for the best performance possible. If you have any questions, I've listed my email address on the presentation that you guys will have access to. Feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'd be happy to help however I can, and can at least point you in the right direction if I don't know the answer. And then finally, I've listed some references. You guys can take a look at these, and there's some good YouTube videos and nutrition tips and scholar articles from the National Institutes of Health that reinforces a lot of what was in this presentation. So I want to thank you for your time, for being part of this webinar and all the others. And Chad, I think we can open this up for any questions.
All right, great. Yeah, thanks, Jason. That was a fantastic presentation.
And we, before we open up for questions, can we go ahead and give them the poll results? So let's go ahead and end the poll so you guys can see the challenges. There you go. So if we share the results here, you can see that I'd say probably 30%, it kind of split down the middle. The aspect of nutrition that is most challenging for you is eating too much processed food and junk food, or knowing which supplements can help the most.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is pretty well spread out. Between those two and pulling up a close third is knowing what to eat and when. And so, a lot of this really falls in line with the flow of that presentation. Is, the lowest number is not eating enough protein. And we outline that most athletes eat enough protein, but the challenge is, well, that's great, but what do I eat and when do I eat it? And, it's easy for me to go grab a pack of Pop-Tarts or a bag of chips. And the confusion around supplements is all over the place. I know when I was an athlete, and maybe you guys as athletes, you hear two different things about the same supplement and they're completely opposite each other. So it's no surprise that those are the top results. So that's a good poll. That's interesting.
Okay, so we can open it up to questions, Chad.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we've got a couple questions here. The first one coming from Kristen Dominique. How long can it take to overcome a deficiency underfueling habit?
Wow, that's a great question, Kristen. Without knowing a lot of specifics, what sport you're in or time of year, if you're in season, off season, but underfueling it's a challenge because there's a media perception, I think, that again, carbs are bad, too many calories are bad. And if you look at it from the standpoint of I'm an athlete, I need to fuel my body. It's just like giving, you've got a sports car, you've got a Lamborghini, and you're giving it the lowest possible gas or no gas and expecting it to go. One tip that I would suggest is, in terms of underfueling or not eating enough calories, if that's what you're specifically referring to, is do it gradually, right? Because if you're trying to not eat as much, but on the other hand, that you need to eat more for performance, again, you have to know your numbers first and foremost. So if that means keeping a food log or working with a dietitian to write down all the foods you eat and the calories, the carbohydrates, the protein, the fat, and what time you eat, you'll get a really good idea of where you're lacking and how. And if you find that you're underfueling, start to make just gradual increases, because there is a mental aspect to that. And if you go from, eating 1,500 calories a day and say, starting tomorrow, I'm going to eat 2,500 calories a day, you're going to go absolutely nuts. You're going to feel awful. Mentally, you're going to feel, completely off the rails. But if you systematically increase your calories by, 200 calories a day for the first week, and you're only eating 200 more calories a day, you go from 1,500 calories today, and for the next week, you're going to eat 1,700. And then the week after that, you're going to eat 1,900. And the week after that, you're going to eat 2,100. It's not going to feel as big of a deal. And that way your body will get used to, consuming all those calories, those more calories and those more consistent calories. But I would make those increases small, 150 calories or 200 calories, which, is like, an extra half a bagel each day. And you're not increasing 200 calories every day. You're making a 200 calorie increase and you're sticking with that for, 3 or 4 or 5 days. And then you make another 250 calorie increase and stick with that for 3 or 4 or 5 days. And, you keep your activity level up and keep yourself busy with other stuff. You won't have time to necessarily dwell on that. But that was a great question.
Yeah, great. And then the next one coming in from Michael Garcia. What are the best steps in measuring the proper daily protein amounts for various athletes?
Best steps. Yeah, great question. So, I mean, the easy answer is, or the most straightforward answer is to log your food, to keep some sort of a running log of, at 8 a.m. I had 4 scrambled eggs and a bowl of oatmeal. And so by keeping that list throughout the day, then you can go back and you can say, okay, each egg has 5 grams of protein, and I can look on the side of the box of oatmeal and I can see how much protein that has. And after 2 or 3 days of doing that, you should be able to get a good sense of, okay, I have a pretty good idea of how much protein I eat on average day in and day out. Sometimes it's a little more, sometimes it's a little less. That palm size rule that I showed with the slide with the chicken, that's a pretty good rule for animal protein. So a palm sized piece of beef has about the same amount of protein. Palm sized piece of turkey, a palm sized piece of fish. And so if you use those as kind of your baselines, that gives you about 25 grams of protein. And so if you do something like that for breakfast, something like that for lunch, something like that for dinner, you're at 75 grams in good quality protein. You throw in a couple of snacks that have 25 grams apiece. Maybe it's a protein shake. Maybe it's a peanut butter sandwich. And now you're at 125 grams of protein. Depending on your sport, depending on your weight, in season or out of season, you could certainly up that to say, okay, well, I'm going to have 2 chicken breasts, or I'm going to have 2 pieces of fish. And now I'm getting 50 grams of protein at each meal. So those are some pretty easy levers. And again, what I would suggest is for a couple of days, maybe you're home now, maybe you're back at school, but to write down the things you eat, the times you eat it. Doing that for too long kind of gets to be burdensome. So, you certainly wouldn't want to keep doing that every single day, but, do it every once in a while, just to kind of check in and see what you're hitting. And also relating that to strength gains or weight gains or things like that, then you'll be able to see, okay, I've increased my protein, I've gained weight, I've gained muscle, I've gained strength. And so you can start to make some of those correlations and relationships.
Good. And then we have another question coming in from Frederick Tressler. Beyond the obvious, eating meat, poultry, taking an iron supplement, what nutritional strategies have you found successful in dealing with endurance athletes who are dealing with low serum ferritin levels? Wow.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a very technical question. I think that's the work of a sports dietitian, sports nutritionist on a technical level, on setting up your meal plan the right way. But, other than iron supplements, other than meat and those sorts of things, there's a wide variety of foods that can give you additional iron. Plenty of vegetables, certainly red meat, iron supplements. There's some relationships with other supplements that are important to know. that, other vitamins especially, that increase the absorption of iron or hinder the absorption of iron. So, I'm happy to shoot me an email later, but, this would be a deeper dive into what are you eating and when are you eating it? What does your overall meal plan look like? What supplements are you taking? Is there an opportunity to take, maybe you don't like to eat a lot of beef, but maybe you could have there's beef protein powder that would give you some of that same iron without kind of bogging you down from an eating meat standpoint, and would help better preserve some of that muscle, especially as an endurance athlete. So certainly check with your dietitian or somebody on campus, or again, shoot me an email. I'm happy to take a little bit deeper look with you.
And then I've got a question about intermittent fasting. That seems to be more popular of a trend now, I'd say, in the general public. I'm not sure in the athletic realm. I know when I was an athlete, intermittent fasting wasn't really a big deal or a thing, but now it seems to be a trend. What have you seen with that, and how does that affect athletes? For the most part, especially in off-season training, workouts are being conducted at 6 a.m. in the morning. So there's generally not enough time to eat or have a good supplement before working out. So what are some recommendations there, you think?
Yeah, great. No, I think that's a great question too, Chad. So I think you hit it right on the head at the beginning. Intermittent fasting is a strategy for the general public. I won't say whether it's a good or a bad strategy for the general public. It's case by case, but certainly not for athletes. The window of feeding is too long between dinner last night and whenever the first time you eat is. I think though, what you said, morning workouts, 6 a.m. workouts, that sort of thing, you're certainly not going to get up and eat a meal before that, but you certainly would have the opportunity to take a shaker bottle with an electrolyte drink, with some simple carbohydrates. Don't use Gatorade, but that's just me. But something in a shaker cup that you can drink that'll give you some calories, that'll give you some sugar, give you some electrolytes, get you through that workout. And then within that 90 minutes to 2 hours after your workout, get something more significant in your system, eggs and oatmeal and fruit and milk and yogurt and that sort of thing, to kind of keep up with muscle building and your performance. But, some people, I know myself included, I work out early in the morning and I don't like to eat before I work out, and my body's gotten used to it. But I'll have a shaker cup, and, I'll have a pre-workout drink in it, and it'll have some carbs in it, and it'll get me through. And then I'll have my breakfast afterwards.
All right. And then one more, what's your take on alkaline water? Alkaline water it's like an electrolyte drink. When should you do it? Some kids nowadays are drinking it all day long, and I don't think that's correct. How do you balance that? When and where should you use alkaline versus regular 7.0 pH water?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because there's a lot of research out there that when you start getting away from 7.0 water, you actually dehydrate yourself, because there's not the balance, there's not the pH balance in alkaline water. And so your body ends up becoming thirstier the more water you drink, which is kind of counterintuitive. I certainly wouldn't prescribe that as an all the time thing, especially for an athlete. There may be some health benefits to that for the general public, but generally speaking, for athletes, if you can stay with, good old bottled water, it doesn't have to be fancy. I think there's certainly some health concerns on the general health side of drinking tap water and some of the stuff, that goes along with that. So there's certainly a benefit to filtered water or bottled water, but I don't know that I would, either A, spend the money or believe the hype of alkaline water being that much more beneficial for an athlete.
And then we have one last comment, not really a question, but Brian Quick let us know that there's another resource for checking supplements. It's an independent company called Consumer Lab, and their website is www.consumerlab.com if anyone's interested in checking that out as well.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, Jason. We
Yeah,
really
absolutely.
appreciate having you give this webinar today. And we may do a follow-up on, just the nutrition for women athlete. I think that would be very good for, understanding the differences between the males and the females.
For sure, for sure. Well, yeah, and so you guys, keep a lookout for this presentation. I think Latasha may send it out.
Yes.
And best of luck to everybody in their sports.
And thank you to all of our attendees for attending today. We thank you, and you will receive the recording within 24 hours of this presentation. Everyone have a great day.